Hello, my name is Cheryl and I'm a Broward County librarian. Today I'm going to present and recommend two books I recently read for Women's History Month. Well, I read these books for Women's History Month, which is celebrated every year in March. They are appropriate for reading and discussing at any time of year. I hope that this presentation will inspire you to read and share these books too. Today, I'm going to present and recommend Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis and A Discerning Eye by Carol Orange. These two books have many features in common. Both books directly or indirectly feature prominent women who made significant contributions to American culture, history, and society. Both books are works of fiction, and they both are historical mystery novels. The first book, Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis, was published in January of 2022. It is available from Broward County Library in regular print, large print, ebook, and audiobook formats. As you may know, the author, Fiona Davis, is an American writer, journalist, and novelist who was born in Canada but was educated in the United States, first at the College of William and Mary, and then at Columbia University School of Journalism, where she obtained a Master of Science degree in journalism in 2000. Before she became a novelist, Fiona Davis worked as a professional stage actress. She also worked as an associate and senior associate producer for a public television station and as a columnist, editor-at-large, and managing editor for Stage Directions magazine. Fiona Davis also did freelance work, and then she began to write as a novelist. Magnolia Palace is her sixth book, and some critics have deemed it her best work. Magnolia Palace is a historical mystery story centering around the lives of the members of the prominent Frick family, and in particular on the lives of Helen Clay Frick and her personal secretary, a fictionalized character based upon the life of a well-known early 20th century artist model, Audrey Munson. In this slide, you see the various members of the Frick family who are characters in Magnolia Palace. Like in many of her published novels, the author Fiona Davis uses dual timelines to tell the story in chapters that alternate between time periods. The novel starts in 1919, the year that the well-known industrialist Henry Clay Frick died. And it continues in the year 1966, when the author describes a fictionalized Vogue magazine photo shoot in the Frick family mansion located in New York City at 5th Avenue and 1 East 70th Street. In 1919, when the novel begins, the Frick family is living in the New York City mansion, whereas in 1966, the descendants of Henry Clay Frick live elsewhere because the mansion has been converted into a public museum known today as the Frick Collection. The dual timelines of Magnolia Palace are united by the story, as well as by some of the characters who survive until 1966 and beyond. As the story unfolds in Magnolia Palace, in 1919, Helen Clay Frick, the only surviving daughter of Henry Clay Frick and Adelaide Howard Childs Frick, hires a personal secretary, Lillian Carter, alias Audrey Munson, to help her manage the affairs of her father, Henry Clay Frick, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the United States, who made a fortune producing coke for the manufacturing of steel. So who were these two women? Who were Helen Clay Frick and Audrey Munson in real life? Until her father died in 1919, Helen Clay Frick, whom you see shown in the painting on the left, which was executed by Edmund Charles Tarbell in 1910, played a significant role in managing her father's personal affairs. After her father died, Helen Clay Frick was instrumental in helping to transform the Frick family mansion in New York City and its extraordinary collection of paintings and decorative arts objects into a public museum in fulfillment of her father's wishes and his legacy as they were set forth in his will. Helen Clay Frick also would document the works of art in the New York City mansion in the first catalog of its collections, and she envisioned and founded the Frick Art Reference Library, which opened to the public in 1923. Helen Clay Frick also served as the only woman on the museum's board of trustees and established the Frick campus in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Audrey Munson, shown in the photograph on the right, was an American artist, model, and film actress who today is considered America's first supermodel. In her time, Audrey Munson was variously known as Miss Manhattan, the Pan American Pacific Girl, the Exposition Girl, and American Venus. She served as the model or inspiration for more than 12 statues in New York City and many others elsewhere, including for the original one over the covered porch-like structure known as a porte cochere at one of the entrances to the Frick family's New York City mansion. Today, this likeness of Audrey Munson has been relocated to the pediment above the Frick family's New York City mansion door, and it is featured on the book cover of Magnolia Palace. At this point, I would like to suggest that if you would like more information about either of these two women and their contributions to American culture, history, and society, then you may be interested in watching the two short videos about these two women found on the Frick Collections website located at www.frick.org/interact/miniseries/what's her story. In Magnolia Palace, initially, the story revolves around a fictionalized relationship between the two women and their identities within the Frick family universe. After Helen's father dies, a priceless family heirloom, the Magnolia diamond, goes missing, and Lillian Carter is forced to flee, fearing that she will be accused of taking the gem. In 1966, the missing art object is found by another monocle, Veronica Weber, with the aid of a museum intern, Joshua Lawrence. When Veronica Weber, who gets snowed into the museum with Joshua Lawrence, accidentally discovers the diamonds while embarking upon a scavenger hunt that originally had been written by Helen Clay Frick. There is more to this story, but I'm not going to spoil it for you by retelling it completely here. I can recommend Magnolia Palace for many reasons. Firstly, the story is compelling, interesting, and difficult to put down, even though it requires readers to suspend their judgments and disbeliefs in order to enjoy it. While the story takes several twists and turns, it's quite believable, even though the author, Fiona Davis, has invented many aspects of it. Secondly, I can recommend Magnolia Palace because the author has done an enormous amount of research to recreate the characters and lives of Helen Clay Frick, Audrey Munson, and the other Frick family members featured in the book. Thirdly, I can recommend this book because Fiona Davis also describes in considerable detail the various homes of the Frick family in New York City, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, as well as the paintings and decorative arts objects in the New York City mansion. Armchair travelers, art and architecture aficionados, museum goers, and people who love to travel will be captivated by this book because of the detail into which the author goes about the aforementioned. In other words, the setting is very real or true, and in many ways, Fiona Davis gives us a value-added feature, a grand tour of the Frick family houses, haunts, and belongings. Readers interested in histories, biographies, historical fiction, and mysteries also will enjoy this book quite a lot. Fourthly, I can recommend this book because as a librarian, the critics have reviewed it favorably. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to read all the reviews to you, but I will read a few. The critic for Booklist magazine writes, Davis embellishes the real lives of the Frick family and Audrey Munson in a tale that will thrill fans. She also jumps skillfully between the roaring 20s and swinging 60s. Similarly, the critic for Library Journal writes that Davis adeptly interweaves two compelling storylines to shine a light on another New York City landmark. Here she writes that this is historical fiction at its best, with well-developed characters, detail, art history, and mystery. Finally, the critic for Publishers Weekly writes that Davis smoothly combines fact and fiction and offers beautiful descriptions of the family's art collection. Here she writes that the colliding narratives and comprehensive descriptions of the historic mansion make this Davis's best work. Believe it or not, I haven't found any more critical reviews of the book published. If you liked Magnolia Palace, then I can recommend several other books in the Broward County Library collections. There are several works of nonfiction which you may wish to consult. The first book, entitled The Henry Clay Frick Houses, was written by the great-granddaughter of Henry Clay Frick, Martha Frick Symington Sanger. The book is entitled The Henry Clay Frick Houses. Another book written by the same descendant is about Henry Clay Frick himself. Then you have a book about the Frick collection objects and artworks. The book is entitled Art in the Frick Collection, and it was written by Bernice Davison and others. If you're interested in a fiction book, which is considered a read-alike, then you may wish to read Seagate by Jane Johnson. The second book I'm going to present and recommend today also is a historical mystery of the criminal sort. The book, entitled Discerning was written by Cheryl Orange, an up-and-coming author with extensive background in the art world. This book was published in 2020, and it's available from Broward County Library. Having obtained an MBA from Simmons University in Boston, Massachusetts, Carol Orange worked as a research editor on art books in London and later became an art dealer and art consultant in Boston. She also worked at the Polaroid Corporation as an advertising manager for South and Central America and lived in Paris for 2 years, where she researched George Sand's life and writings. Her essays and short stories have been widely published. Carol Orange's debut novel, A Discerning Eye, begins in Boston, Massachusetts, in the immediate aftermath of history's largest art museum robbery. During the night of March 18, 1990, while revelers in the city of Boston celebrated St. Patrick's Day, two thieves disguised as policemen gained a legal entry into the world-renowned Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, tied up the museum's security guards, and stole 13 works of art and decorative arts objects, including masterpieces by renowned artists, including Johann Vermeer, Rembrandt van Rooyen, Edward Manet, and Edgar Degas. 30 years later, this crime remains unsolved. While none of the paintings have been recovered, and the museum continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to the safe recovery of the Gardner Museum's stolen art, which has been valued at more than $500 million, but essentially is priceless and irreplaceable. Inspired by this tragic robbery, the author, Cheryl Orange, presents an art heist mystery replete with high-stakes international intrigue involving Interpol, the FBI, the mafia, and drug lords. In A Discerning Eye, the daring, clever art dealer and Gardner Museum docent of Italian-American descent, Portia Malatesta, one of the book's main protagonists, and in many ways the author's alter ego, is devastated when she learns of the art museum robbery, and she becomes determined to find the stolen masterpieces. Using her knowledge of the museum and its artworks, Portia constructs a psychological profile of the person responsible for masterminding the art museum heist by analyzing a common feature in most of the stolen artworks and objects, the interplay of light and darkness. And she presents a profile to the FBI, which then enlists her help in a sting operation to recover the stolen artworks and decorative arts objects. Traveling to Medellin, Colombia, the second major city in the story, Portia must earn the trust of a notorious drug lord's daughter. Like the author, Cheryl Orange, Portia is enchanted by the museum and its extraordinary art collection, and she idolizes the museum's founder, Isabella Stewart Gardner, whom you see pictured in the photograph on the screen, and her discerning eye. So who was Isabella Stewart Gardner, and what was her legacy, and how did she influence the book's main character, Portia Malatesta, to dive into Colombia's underworld, in which any misstep could prove deadly in order to retrieve the stolen artworks and art objects? Born in New York City in 1840, Isabella Stewart was raised in a wealthy and privileged family. Her father imported linens and textiles and eventually expanded his business into mining. She was educated in New York City, and then she traveled abroad to Paris to complete her education. While abroad, Isabella Stewart was introduced to her future husband, Jack, who was the brother of her good friend, Julia Gardner. In 1816, Isabella Stewart married Jack and moved to the Back Bay section of Boston, where she would live at 152 Beacon Street. After the couple's first child, Jack Jr., died of pneumonia, Isabella Stewart Gardner went traveling abroad to Europe and Asia to recover from depression. Upon her return, she began to collect rare books, and then, after the death of her father in 1891, precious artworks and objects. After Isabella Stewart Gardner's husband died in 1899, Mrs. Gardner commissioned the prominent New England architect William Thomas Sears to design her home and a museum in the Fenway neighborhood of Boston. This home and museum would become known as Fenway Court. Miss Gardner would open her home to the public in 1903. Living on the fourth floor of the museum, Isabella Stewart Gardner organized concerts, exhibitions, and artists in residence. Passing away at 84 years of age in 1925 after suffering from a debilitating stroke several years earlier in 1919. Isabella Stewart Gardner left her collection for the education and enjoyment of the public, provided it remained unchanged. Known for her free-spirited nature, determination, and outspoken voice, Isabella Stewart Gardner believed art had the power to change lives, and she considered it one of the greatest needs and a civic duty to collect art. Serving as an example for the main character of A Discerning Eye, Portia Malatesta, in terms of her determination and outspoken voice, Mrs. Gardner inspired Portia Malatesta to risk everything, including her life and marriage, in order to recover the 13 works of art and decorative arts objects stolen from the museum. Moved by the example of the museum's founder and her extraordinary legacy, Portia Malatesta is able to successfully crack the Gardner Art Museum heist case. I can recommend Carol Orange's A Discerning Eye for many reasons. Firstly, like Fiona Davis's Magnolia Palace, Carol Orange's A Discerning Eye is a compelling, fascinating, and action-packed tale that's difficult to put down. It is filled with tensions, temptations, and twists and turns that will keep readers turning the pages and guessing throughout. Secondly, like Fiona Davis's Magnolia Palace, which features Helen Clay Frick and Audrey Munson, two women whose contributions to American culture, history, and society deserve to be fully recognized. A Discerning Eye, albeit indirectly, features at least another prominent woman who contributed enormously to American culture, history, and society during her lifetime, Isabella Stewart Gardner. Thirdly, I can recommend this book because Carol Orange utilizes her vast knowledge of art and her experiences working in Boston and Latin America to craft a highly plausible and believable mystery. Her realistic story is rooted in many of the facts of the art museum heist and her knowledge of art and the art world. Fourthly, I can recommend this book because, like Davis, who gives us a grand tour of the Frick family's universe, the author, Carol Orange, takes readers on an armchair traveler's tour of Boston and Medellin, Colombia, and the various attractions of both cities, as well as of internationally renowned art collections and museums. While critics, writers, and interviewers have described A Discerning Eye as a Boston book, I also would argue that it's a Medellin, Colombia book because it also goes into considerable detail about that city, its inhabitants, neighborhoods, museums, and other attractions. The details about these two cities and their attractions give readers genuine and convincing senses of these two places that add enormous value and appeal to the story. Armchair travelers, art aficionados, museum goers, and others will become engrossed in this book's settings and descriptions. Readers who enjoy biographies, histories, and travelogues also will enjoy this book immensely. Finally, I can recommend this book because as a librarian, for the most part, critics have reviewed A Discerning Eye quite favorably. Again, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to read all the reviews to you, but I will read a few. The critic for Library Journal writes that the book's premise is clever and it wraps up the crime. The critic for Vanity Fair says that A Discerning Eye takes readers on a journey that is both tense and wonderfully escapist. He or she writes that Carol Orange's rich knowledge of art history and powers of visual description elevate the book into the realm of John le Carre sophistication. More critical reviews have been written. The one which I would like to share with you today was written by the critic for Library Journal magazine. She writes, Orange captures Boston well, its landmarks, eateries, and place names. But she says that the story suffers from excessive background, and she critiques Orange's book to the extent that Orange completely glosses over the field of operative training that Portia, the main character, sorely lacks. If you liked A Discerning Eye, then I can recommend that you consult other books in the Broward County Library collections. The first book, which I would like to suggest that you look at, is entitled Isabella Stewart Gardner and Fenway Court, and it was written by Morris Carter. The book covers Isabella Stewart Gardner's life and her museum. The second book, which I would like to suggest that you look at, is A Guide to the Museum and its Collections. It's entitled The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and it was written by staff from the museum. The third book is entitled Master Thieves, and it was written by Stephen Kirchian, and it's one of the several books which has been written about the Gardner Art Museum heist. Finally, if you're interested in reading a fiction book about the art museum and the art museum robbery, then I would suggest that you read a book by B.A. Shapiro entitled Art Forger. If you have any questions about this presentation or the books and resources mentioned in it, then please don't hesitate to contact me or the library at 954-765-1560. Or please contact us by means of the Ask a Librarian service located at askalibrarian.org. I hope that I have inspired you to read and share these two books, if you haven't done so already. Thanks for listening today. We hope to see you soon in the library, and have a great day.